هذا غلام وأسروا بضاعة والله عليم بما يفعلون وشروا بثمن بخس دراهم معدودة وكانوا فيه من الزاهدين. وقال الذي اشتراه من مصر لامرأته أكرمي مثواه عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض ولنعلمه من تأويل الأحاديث والله غالب على أمره ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. ولما بلغ أشده آتيناه حكما وعلما وكذلك نجزي المحسنين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسيق الذين اتقوا ربهم إلى جهنم زمرا. لا 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 القبلها هذه قبل هذيك. لا الذين كفروا الأول بعدين لا الأولاني. نبدأ من الأول لسه في 4 دقائق 3 دقائق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ونفخ في الصور فصعق من في السماوات ومن في الأرض إلا من شاء الله ثم نفخ فيه أخرى فإذا هم قيام ينظرون. وأشرقت الأرض بنور ربها ووضع الكتاب وجيء بالنبيين والشهداء وقضي بينهم بالحق وهم لا يظلمون. وسيق الذين كفروا إلى جهنم زمرا حتى إذا جاءوها فتحت أبوابها وقال لهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم رسل منكم يتلون عليكم آيات ربكم وينذرونكم لقاء يومكم هذا قالوا بلى ولكن حقت كلمة العذاب على الكافرين. قيل ادخلوا أبواب جهنم خالدين فيها فبئس مثوى المتكبرين. وسيق الذين اتقوا ربهم إلى الجنة زمرا حتى إذا جاءوها وفتحت أبوابها وقال لهم خزنتها سلام عليكم طبتم فادخلوها خالدين وقالوا الحمد لله الذي صدقنا وعده وأورثنا الأرض نتبوأ من الجنة حيث نشاء فنعم أجر العاملين. وترى الملائكة حافين من حول العرش يسبحون بحمد ربهم وقضي بينهم بالحق وقيل الحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا كل شيء خلقناه بقدر وما أمرنا إلا واحدة كلمح بالبصر ولقد أهلكنا أشياعكم فهل من مدكر ولقد أهلكنا أشياعكم فهل من مدكر وكل شيء فعلوه في الزبر وكل صغير وكبير مستطر إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله مولانا العلي العظيم. الفاتحة for everyone's مرحومين and مرحومات. بسم الله الرحمن
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين فاطر السماوات والأراضين خالق الشمس والقمر باسط الرزق فالق الإصباح ذو الجلال والإكرام، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا سيد الخلق أجمعين حبيبنا حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. عباد الله أوصيكم وأوصي نفسي بتقوى الله العظيم. Brothers and sisters, I would like to advise myself and all of you to be careful of our deeds, to be careful of our thoughts, to be careful of our feelings, and make sure that every one of them conforms with divine guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this universe, created all of us, every bit of us. Every bit of what we see, what we feel, what we hear, and everything that we don't hear or sense. It's all created by God and governed by God. Rabbul Alameen. I'm sure we all repeat these words. These are words that are part of Surah Al-Hamd. It's a regular reminder every single prayer. But the reason why we deviate from the teachings that God gives us is because we don't trust that He governs it. It's because we think we see something that He didn't see. Okay. It's because we think we see things that other things are in charge of and God is not in charge of. And so He says, do A, like, no, that obviously is going to lead to a disaster. I think I know more than he does. And so I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do B, because I think this is what's going to lead to prosperity. Allah is the creator of it all, a creator of us all. Our feelings are governed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our feelings are governed. When God says, for example, that ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة. You've read this probably many times in Surah Baqarah toward the beginning. Allah says that we put a veil on their eyes. They just don't see it. It's not that they don't see the facts. It's that in their mind it doesn't click. Not that it never clicked. That's a misunderstanding that people sometimes have, and it leads to wrong decisions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows when they reject eventually, because as the point is, our feelings, our thoughts, our insight is governed by Him. He says, this is the law. I will show it to you clearly. If you reject it, I'll show it to you again. If you reject it, I'll show it to you again. After a few times you keep rejecting, I'm not going to let you see it anymore. That's just how it works. This bad example. Netanyahu, he just doesn't see it. You just can't see it. When you live a life, not just him, Joe Biden's pretty similar. It seems like they're doing the same thing. They just don't see it. God says, look, in Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, these are verses for all of us. These are verses for all of us. Every verse in the Quran is for all of us. There's no verse that is limited to one group or the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Banu Israel. What do Banu Israel have to do with us? Are we just bad-mouthing Jews? Is that what the Quran is doing? No, absolutely not. It's because they are people who were given guidance and they accepted guidance. That's what فَضَّلْتُكُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ means. They accepted the guidance. Then after accepting it, some of them, a number that allows God to use the language of all of them, or the nation. Because when you call a nation out, then you're not meaning every single person there. You're referring to the nation as a whole, okay? That doesn't mean every single. The majority of a people count as the nation. If the majority of a people go in a certain direction, a certain nation goes a certain direction. That's how it is called, and that's how God calls it. Banu Israel are people who accepted what God gave them as guidance, then they rejected it in various ways. And all these verses in the Quran are for us to learn from. And of course, learn in the context that we are living in, the things that we're seeing, all the various aspects. Allah says to them in Surah Al-Isra that we gave you a promise in the book that you will لَتُفْسِدُنَّ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَّتَيْن, that you're going to be causing corruption on earth twice. This is in their book. I saw this verse being referred to and referenced for the current situation in Gaza. This verse is not related to, these two accounts are not related to what's going on in Gaza and the Palestinian issue right now. There is another verse that's related to it, and I'll get to that. God says, you will cause corruption in the earth, meaning it's not somebody in their home doing something. It's on a political level. It's something that will have to do with a government, establishing a government, and you're going to use that to cause corruption on earth. And when you do that every single time, we will send our ibad. Allama Tabatabai has an interesting discussion on this. He says, there's nowhere in the verse that suggests that ibad are good people. God says, we will send our servants. History tells us, because these two accounts are already done, history tells us they were actually not very good people. But they were, this is another piece of evidence on the point that was mentioned, everything belongs to Allah. لِلَّهِ جُنُودُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Non-Muslims, the non-theists that fought the Jews at that time, those two instances that the Quran refers to, they were not theists. They were not good people. God says, you cause corruption, we will send people to get rid of you. All right. He governs it. These people don't want to understand. They don't want to get it. And then the verse that is relevant is after the two instances. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, عَسَى رَبَّكُمْ أَن يَرْحَمَكُمْ وَإِنْ عُدْتُمْ عُدْنَا. These are two times. Do it again, same thing's going to happen to you again. I mean, that's what's happening right now, right? Everything is governed by, these are examples. And I want to bring this back to us. Again, the Quran isn't bad-mouthing any people. What's the point of bad-mouthing people? The Quran is providing guidance and showing you and showing us examples. Look, as an individual and as a nation, if you go with and do what God says. لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Be just. Have justice in your personal life. Treat everything the way God has said. He set the وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ بِالْقِسْطِ. He set up the establishments of justice. What is the measurement for everything? He set it up and He knows what it is, how much of everything. If you go with that, you're going to be prosperous in this life and the hereafter. You're going to get in this life and in the next blessings that are unimaginable. It's Fatimiyya, according to some accounts. This is the first Fatimiyya, and I want to give this example. The blessings that we can imagine deal with what we see, apparently, right? It's the trees, it's the nice landscaping, it's the nice beaches, it's the $1 million homes, the cars, the way people do surgery. They go to dentists, get their teeth done in a certain way. That's all apparent stuff, which is not bad, by the way. I'm not bad, but that's our limit. Those are not bad things. It's bad to think that they're ultimately what you should be working toward. That shouldn't be your goal. Having that whenever possible, as long as it doesn't get in the way of something more important, it's great. There's nothing wrong with that, God has said. But that's the extent of which we can understand. Fatimatu Zahra salamullahi alayha, according to an account that I heard from one of the scholars giving this account, I haven't seen the hadith, the account in history books or in a hadith book myself, but I trust this source. He's not the type of person that would just randomly select some account. He says that Amir al-Mu'mineen came home, and you can just imagine, this is Medina, right? Medina at the time of the Prophet, go back 1400 years. None of the advancements in the infrastructure, the roads, the homes, the landscaping, the gardening, all that stuff, just basic natural stuff, limited, all that. And then in addition to that, they are migrants. They have immigrated from Mecca to Medina, and they've been at war. They've been boycotted. They've been at war. All that financially, they're not doing good. And Fatimatu Zahra salamullahi alayha is home while Amir al-Mu'mineen has been out for a time. I don't know exactly how long this is, a month, give or take, perhaps. And he returns, and as soon as he sees Fatimatu Zahra, he notices that she has not been eating well. It's very evident in her face that she's lost weight and maybe other signs of malnutrition. Amir al-Mu'mineen asks, what's happening? She said that, well, we didn't have. Okay. This part this is all the parts that we can understand. From here on, Amir al-Mu'mineen asks her, why didn't you ask God? Allah provided for Maryam, salamullahi alayha, who was Sayyidatu Nisa'il Alameen of her time, from where Zakaria couldn't figure out. He would go and he would neglect sometimes perhaps, and he would arrive there and see there's food, abundance of food, great ones that he probably couldn't even recognize where they were bought from. And he asked, where'd this come from? She said, from Jannah. God sent. God sends. Fatimatu Zahra, Sayyidatu Nisa'il Alameen of all times. Why didn't you ask? This is the part we don't get. The line is this. She said, شغلتني لذة حضوره عن مسألته. I was too busy enjoying the presence of God to notice that I need something to ask. That's the part we don't get. We think we're limited to this. If we listen to what God says, because this, I don't know about you, but for me, this is alien. Like, I would like to experience whatever that is she's talking about, but I haven't experienced that. How do you get there? How do you get to something that profound that, I think the closest thing I can relate to is gamers. You know, they say, or people, they say they have an addiction to the internet. They're so into it that they forget about eating and food and drink until they lose weight and malnutrition and all of that. They're just too big. They don't notice what their body's needs are. They're so distracted from it with something else. What is that? A video game or something else. Right? That's the closest thing I can relate that to. But this is something that the eyes cannot see. It's something that the heart can feel. And there's something called seeing there that is not seeing with these eyes, but it's something that is more real than what you can see with these eyes, and it's not hallucination. How do we get there? How do we get this? Where these pity things, which are fine, they're great, enjoy. Fatima Zahra didn't only have that, she had Fadak as well. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. She had Fadak at a different time of her life. Fadak is huge. None of you own anything. None of us. I don't own anything like that. She was very wealthy at that time. There's times where she didn't have. There's times that she was very wealthy. There's nothing wrong with wealth. The moral of the story isn't that wealth is bad. It's that do what God says. You will get both. Okay, you'll get both. He governs it. That's what taqwa means. When God says, be careful. Thank you so much. Recite a salawat, please. When God says, be careful of what I have said, it's not for His good. It's for you and I. If we believe that, we realize it, we go by it, which requires us to look into what He has said. We don't look into what He has said. The Qur'ans are sitting on the shelves. The best we do with them is learn how to read it as a foreign language without understanding a word of it. Beautiful sound, sounds great, put on Qur'an, and we got Qur'an going. We're a family that listens to the Qur'an. No, that's not what that is. That's musical. That sounds great. Okay. It's amazing. Yes, there is benefit to even that, but that's not the purpose of it. That's something that while you read to understand, you get those other benefits as well. Not read it or have it read to you for that purpose. That's not the objective of it. If we look for that guidance, the Qur'an is filled with guidance. And it's for every single one of us. Not for one person to think that they can understand and then everybody else, you guys don't think, and then I'm going to come and present. You guys don't understand, I understand. No, that's not how it is. It's for everybody. It's for every single one of us. It speaks to every single one of us. If we just start to familiarize ourselves with the language, it's God's language. It's not a human being's language. It's different. You got to become accustomed to it. You have to keep reading it. That's why it tells you. It says many verses, read whatever you can. Read, read. It is for our benefit. We hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us move in that direction, both individually, each of us, and also collectively. If a community, if a family, I'll start with that, if a family, the spouses, the parents, govern themselves based on what God says, they treat each other based on that, and everything else around them based on God's teachings, the home environment will be so pleasant. You wouldn't have anxiety going back home. You wouldn't be waiting for an opportunity to get out of the house, whether it's your spouse or your children, because when the spouses, when they establish that relationship between themselves based on what God has said and toward Allah, then it creates an environment that the children grow. This is wrong. Our method of education is force-feeding information of Islam to our next generation. That does not work. Doesn't work. They have to pick it up. You don't force-feed language. They pick it up. You act, speak, think Islam, they will pick it up. And they will take it further than where you took it. And that home environment will be so pleasant. You would want to look at your children. You would want to look at your spouse and enjoy just their presence, their greatness, their purity. And if a nation, if a community, if a society decides to govern their lives based on that, it'd be wonderful. And once there will be a time that the entirety of the globe will be governed by that, people will willingly choose that. And that's how it works. They will want it. حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا. طوع. They want it. People need to come to a realization that they want this. And when they want it and everybody collectively moves in that direction, that's where you have the closest thing to paradise that's possible in this life before the next. We ask Allah to guide us all, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا سيد الخلق أجمعين، حبيبنا حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى أخيه وابن عمه ووصيه ووزيره علي بن أبي طالب أمير المؤمنين، وعلى ابنته سيدة نساء العالمين فاطمة الزهراء، وعلى سبطيه سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين. ثم نصلي ونسلم على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وعلي وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف القائم المهدي روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء. عباد الله أوصيكم وأوصي نفسي بتقوى الله العظيم. Oh brothers and sisters, I advise myself firstly and all of you to be careful again of God's instructions. The result of not implementing those instructions is nothing but destruction, nothing but losses. One of the greatest losses of the world was the loss of Fatima Zahra at age 18. Salamullahi alayha. This loss is a result of others not implementing God's teachings. She, on the other hand, implemented them on a scale that we are incapable of comprehending. Our comprehension does not really understand the layers of obedience that Fatima Zahra went through throughout her life, but especially in that last segment of her life around the demise of the Prophet up to her own demise and her istishhad, her martyrdom. And therefore, the effect of that obedience on that scale, not the average basic scale that someone like me is struggling with. It's on a much, much higher scale. We don't even know what obedience on that level is. It's an obedience on a level where the feelings, the nuances of the feelings, how good do you feel? What's the scale of happiness? Right? You feel very happy if you get one food, depending on the ingredients. And if you get something else, depends on who makes that nihari, right? You can get a really good one, and that's going to really hit the spot if it's the right time, right? Other mediocre, okay, it's not going to be as good. There's levels of happiness and joy. On that level, the nuances of the amount of happiness and joy and the amount of anger and wrath. Fatima al-Zahra is obedient to Allah, and that is reflected in the hadith that says, Ridaha rida Allah. Her pleasure, when she is pleased, that reflects God being pleased with someone. She is that obedient to Allah. Allah has blessed her with guidance and instruction how much to be happy with someone and how much to be angry with another. Hub and bughd. Fatimiyya is a very important time, and I think it's by design that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hidden both her grave and in a certain way her time of shahada, because that allows us to commemorate at least twice, if not 3 times. There's another account that is not commonly or as commonly commemorated. We are in need of commemorating this event and thinking about it. So the first point I want to make is, please, we need to read. We can't rely on oral transmission, right? Don't rely on somebody like myself coming and presenting something that may or may not be very accurate. There are books. There are books, and there's thought that needs to be going into that. There's so much that has not been discovered because we have just left these stories, or that history rather, almost untouched. Repeating just the part that has to do with her being madhloom, which is not even what she did. It's what others did to her. We haven't investigated and studied what she did that brought that treatment to her. We haven't done that. We have not analyzed. We have not understood. We cannot, if they ask us a couple of simple questions, everybody was like, I don't know. I just know that this is what happened. Like, how is that possible? You say Ali was there and this happened. I'm like, oh, Ali was there in the house? Let me ask. Yeah, he was there. Okay, then if Ali was in the house, this could happen? Like, no, this couldn't happen if Ali was there. Well, guess what? It did happen. He was there. Why? We didn't think about that. Like, this can't be possible. These are the ashab of the Prophet. Look at the verses of the Quran. Look at all the admirations. Look at all the descriptions, all the praise for these people as companions of the Prophet. Numerous verses of the Quran. It's God speaking. It's not even a person speaking. It's God speaking. It's the verses of the Quran. And you say 18th of Ghadir, 18th of Dhul Hijjah, Ghadir, the event of Ghadir. The Prophet mentioned to everybody that Ali ibn Abi Talib is Amirul Mu'mineen after him. And he asked everybody to greet him with that title and shake hands with him as bay'ah with that title. Have women to do and pledge their bay'ah according to accounts in a way where at the time was common. The Prophet introduced this on a completely separate note. This is what Islam says. Islam introduced women's involvement in social political affairs. The Prophet said women, if they understand this, if they want to do what God says, this is what they need to do. They came, they pledged allegiance in this way. There was a bucket of water. Amir al-Mu'mineen had his hand in it. The women would come and put their hands in that bucket of water on the other side. And they would pledge allegiance. Okay. They were involved. You say he did that? Okay. The same companions that are praised so much in the Quran, none of them. And then some of the closest ones, the father-in-laws of the Prophet, led this thing where, does this even make sense? And We haven't analyzed. And then worse, we don't analyze what Ali ibn Abi Talib did. If he was Amir al-Mu'mineen, was he scared? Was he incapable of fighting? The whole battle of Ahzab was won because of Ali ibn Abi Talib close to 10 years, 7, 8 years, 6 years earlier. And everyone saw that. Fought the biggest champion of the Arabs and defeated him. When the same people who were there supposedly taking this away from him were too coward to go up and fight. Are you telling me that Ali was incapable of doing that? And if he didn't, why? We didn't think of any of that. So the first point, brothers, sisters, as someone who was born Shia and have been to plenty of majalis growing up, before going to the Hawza, and going to the Hawza, hearing ulama that have studied, analyzing, looking at it, delivering talks for close to 20 years now on this topic and other topics, I will tell you, at least myself, I don't know about you, maybe you all do know, I don't think I know a lot of things there. There's still a lot to work on and figure out. I haven't found it in the works of ulama. There's work to do. And I haven't thought of things. I have questions that I don't have answers for. And I recognize that's only the parts I've noticed. There's probably more that I have not noticed. Please, brothers, sisters, it is up to us. Holding majalis is great, necessary, important, but not enough. It's not sufficient. Each of us has got to read, think, analyze. Take the material presented in the majlis, analyze, put it together. Does it make sense or is it baloney? The second point I would like to make, again, I guess I'm not going to have time. It's already over my time. I didn't want to take this time. Hopefully very briefly. After studying all of that, what's the purpose? What is our approach to study this? Why do we study this? What are we trying to come up with? Are we trying to set up a court to judge people of history 1,400 years ago? This guy was like this, that guy was like that, this guy's going to hell, the other guy's going to paradise. Is that the purpose? The Qur'an's response to that approach is تِلْكَ أُمَّةٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ لَهَا مَا كَسَبَتْ وَعَلَيْهَا مَا اكْتَسَبَتْ. That's a people that have passed. What they have gained, they've gained. What they have done against themselves, they have done. And you will know on the day of judgment, you don't really, there's so much you can figure out and understand. If that's the purpose, the Quran says leave those types of discussions. Did they do this or the other? It's like, what's the purpose? You want to know that detail of this. Sometimes people come, well, did this happen like this exactly? And was it like, what are you trying to get to? What are you trying to understand with that? Just that you're curious about this little detail? All right. What's the objective? The objective of the Quran in telling history and our objective in studying the history of the Ahlul Bayt that is not in the Quran but needs to be understood in light of the Quran as they were reflections of the Quran is for us to learn in this day and age what we need to do. That's what the purpose is supposed to be. What was Fatima Zahra trying to do so I can make sure that I do that? What were those who were going against her, Amir al-Mu'mineen and Amir al-Mu'mineen, doing wrong so I don't do that? What were the people who remained silent, which were the majority, by the way? The majority weren't against Amir al-Mu'mineen. The majority were silent. The majority just simply did not support Ali. And that was this little detail of history I would tell you. Amir al-Mu'mineen's instructions, divine instructions that the Prophet also told him was, if people support, you stand. They will try to take this. If people support, you will fight. If they don't support, no, you don't do that. Fatima Zahra had another instruction for herself to make it clear, this new establishment that claims to have the office of Khilafah, successorship to the Prophet, does not succeed him. From day one, they are going against the Prophet's teachings. And that had to be stamped with her blood. And she had to stand there. That's why Ali had to watch. That was his instruction. You don't engage. This is above us. This is not regular instructions that you and I receive. Fatima Zahra, salamullahi alayha, wallah, stood behind that door. And Ali watched her. And he did nothing because that was his instruction. It was made clear from day one, all the fabrications, lies. For who? For people then to see. If they would have seen, then they should have done something. The majority weren't against Ali. No. For it to be recorded, for you and I to see, for people throughout this time to see. For guidance. That's why she is Zahra. She's a beacon, the brightest beacon. The brightest beacon. The more you look at her, the more you study her, the more you hear her voice, the more you cry for her, the more you beat your chest for her, the more you hold majalis for her, the more you're able to see guidance, because that's what she is. She is the beacon of guidance, the brightest beacon, Az-Zahra, salamullahi alayha. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم. I'm sorry, I have to put this in. We thank Allah for this pause, they call it, because they want to avoid calling it a ceasefire. Inshallah, God will knock a little bit of sense into their heads. There's no way of them winning this. They need to stop this genocide before they dig their graves any deeper than they already have. There's no way out of this. They are definitely the ones at loss. We thank Allah for them to have this relief. And some of the prisoners being released, we ask Allah to grant further relief by making this not only just a ceasefire, but a ceasefire with the conditions of the resistance, which is the conditions that the Palestinian people want in Gaza, starting with the removal of the blockade, inshallah ta'ala. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله
حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده ربي صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. حول الله وقوته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاءك المنافقون قالوا نشهد إنك لرسول الله والله يعلم إنك لرسوله والله يشهد إن المنافقين لكاذبون اتخذوا أيمانهم جنة فصدوا عن سبيل الله إنهم ساء ما كانوا يعملون ذلك بأنهم آمنوا ثم كفروا فطبع على قلوبهم فهم لا يفقهون. وإذا رأيتهم تعجبك أجسامهم وإن يقولوا تسمع لقولهم كأنهم خشب مسندة يحسبون كل صيحة عليهم هم العدو فاحذرهم قاتلهم الله أنى يؤفكون. وإذا قيل لهم تعالوا يستغفر لكم رسول الله لووا رؤوسهم ورأيتهم يصدون وهم مستكبرون. سواء عليهم أستغفرت لهم أم لم تستغفر لهم لن يغفر الله لهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. هم الذين يقولون لا تنفقوا على من عند رسول الله حتى ينفضوا ولله خزائن السماوات والأرض ولكن المنافقين لا يفقهون. يقولون لئن رجعنا إلى المدينة ليخرجن الأعز منها الأذل ولله العزة ولرسوله وللمؤمنين ولكن المنافقين لا يعلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تلهكم أموالكم ولا أولادكم عن ذكر الله ومن يفعل ذلك فأولئك هم الخاسرون. وأنفقوا مما رزقناكم من قبل أن يأتي أحدكم الموت فيقول رب لولا أخرتني إلى أجل قريب فأصدق وأكن من الصالحين ولن يؤخر الله نفسا إذا جاء أجلها والله خبير بما تعملون. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا من له الدنيا والآخرة ارحم من ليس له الدنيا والآخرة. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله الله الله.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الزهراء عليه السلام.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الأول قبل الإنشاء والأحياء والآخر بعد فناء الأشياء العليم الذي لا ينسى من ذكراه ولا ينقص من شكراه ولا يخيب من دعاه ولا يقطع رجاء من رجاه. اللهم إني أشهدك وكفى بك شهيدا وأشهد جميع ملائكتك وسكان سماواتك وحملة عرشك ومن بعثت من أنبيائك ورسولك وأنشأت من أصناف خلقك أني أشهد أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك ولا عديل ولا خلفك لقولك ولا تبديل وأن محمدا صلى الله عليه وآله عبدك ورسولك أدى ما حملته إلى العباد وجاهد في الله عز وجل حق الجهاد وأنه بشر بما هو حق من الثواب وأنذر بما هو صدق من العقاب. اللهم ثبتني على دينك ما أحييتني ولا تزغ قلبي بعد إذ هديتني وهب لي من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد واجعلني من أتباعه وشيعته واحشرني في زمرتي ووفقني لأداء فرض الجمعات وما أوجبت عليها فيها من الطاعات وقسمت لأهلها من العطاء في يوم الجزاء إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآله. الله أكبر الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. حول الله وقوته أقول وأقول. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج واجعلنا من أنصاره وأشياعه والذابين عنه. واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديك طائعين غير مكرهين في الصف الذين عدت أهله في كتابك فقلت صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص على طاعتك وطاعة نبيك وآله عليهم السلام. الله. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. حول الله وقوته. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته وقل وعطائه. أستغفر الله وأتوب. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله الله.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام، وأسأله أن يتوب عليها توبة عبد ذليل خاطئ فقير بائس مسكين مستكين مستجير، لا يملك لنفسه نفع ولا ضرا ولا موت ولا حياة ولا نشورا. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من نفس لا تشبع، ومن قلب لا يخشع، ومن علم لا ينفع، ومن صلاة لا ترفع، ومن دعاء لا يسمع. اللهم إني أسألك اليسر بعد الأسر، والفرج بعد الكرب، والرخاء بعد الشدة. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
متوجه زيارة. السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا خاتم النبيين. السلام عليك يا ابن عبد الله يا باعث الهدى ويا رحمة للعالمين. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين ويا قائد الغر المحجلين. السلام عليك يا أسد الله الغالب يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا مولاتي يا فاطمة الزهراء يا سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا بضعة خاتم النبيين. السلام عليك وعلى أمك خديجة الكبرى جدة الأئمة. السلام عليك أيها الإمام الولي الناصح الزكي. السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك وأناخت برحلك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أبا الفضل العباس أخ الحسين وعلى السيدة الحوراء زينب شريكة الحسين. السلام على الأئمة المعصومين علي زين العابدين ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد التقي الجواد وعلي النقي الهادي والحسن العسكري. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان. الأمان 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 من فتن الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وجعلنا من أنصار ظهورك وأعوانك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. دعاء إمام الزمان. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكن أرضك طوعا وتمتع فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. براي خشنودي إمام زمان بلندتر صلوات الله.